start today in terms of the multi-model world with reorienting ourselves to why we need to change. And I think it boils down to a single four-letter word, and not one of those bad four-letter words, but the word need. Change happens because we have to, because it has to happen. We don't, as a general rule as human beings, change because we wake up in the morning and go, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we did our work differently today? Change happens because there is a need. And you almost would argue that not only does it have to be a need, but a pain that needs to be resolved. And I suggest that categorization, that need and that pain can be categorized into three macro categories. Interesting. Well, the first one, and there are three, the first one is performance issues. And performance issues are issues with how work is done inside the organization. And the second is regulations and mandates, which are changes that are reflected from outside the organization. The third is business, and that's the proverbial burning platform, problems that are driven from the external, the market in. So performance issues, regulations and mandates, and business issues. So sort of a three-cornered triangle, much akin to what we see in the iron triangle, just with different words. You know, the critical word is that there's a problem or an issue that has to be adjusted. You know, the removal of pain provides the constraints on how we'll appraise the change, and how great the pain will tell us how fast we have to go to actually adjust to it. All of these will help us make a decision in terms of how we leverage multiple models within an organization, or at least the scope of the change, which will drive us into a discussion of multiple models. And I am not changing slides here.
Okay, I'll move them for you until you unfreeze.
Yeah, thank you. I need to be on the affecting change slide. So change, while Michael is moving us over to the slide.
We are. I think Tom, I think your computer is frozen because we have moved to the slide. So I would assume just send from your hard copy. I'll change the slides, and I think we'll be fine.
Excellent. All right. So change is a science, and therefore, at least for me, it's important to think about it almost mathematically to help frame out how we would address change. So there is an equation or a number of equations. The one I like is actually the Beckhardt model of change, and obviously there were multiple people involved in developing that basically says that dissatisfaction, the vision of the future, and the first steps toward change have to outweigh to override the overall resistance within the organization. Otherwise, change doesn't happen. So that change equation really suggests that you have to have some degree of dissatisfaction. It goes back to that pain and that need, and that you have to have a vision of the future. You have to know where to go to be able to make those kinds of change. And then to start change, you obviously have to take those first steps. So those all three things must outweigh the resistance. Models are a means of helping us organize to overcome resistance. Models provide us with a vision of where we might go in the future. It provides us information about what those first steps are. and so if we have those, we can leverage that with the overall dissatisfaction to understand how to drive that forward. Providing a vision and helping that first steps, and the complexity, unfortunately, the complexity of the real world suggests that if we only pick one standard, we can only have a very, very domain-specific kind of view, and that to address pains and needs that are larger than a very specific domain, we're going to have to embrace more than one model. Now, obviously, all of those have differences in terms of their scope and the areas that they cover, and therefore potentially an increase of risk, an increase of cost, and a number of other things. So if we go to slide 9, we know that we need to affect change. We have identified some levers that we know that we have to at least monitor as we affect change. Complexity really is the root of why you need to address change through multiple models. The IT landscape, if you just looked at the IT landscape, is probably no more physically complex than it was 10 years ago, but with all of the additions and the blurring of boundaries, there are other complexities that have leached in. The overall leveraging of business environment with those conflicting goals as they reflect into IT. The overall process environment with all sorts of different models, all sorts of different frameworks, all sorts of different silver bullets. And then a people environment that 10, 15 years ago was simply the culture of the cubes that looked around you or the offices that looked around you, that's now global and with multiple different cultures involved. Therefore, the overall level of complexity has gone up. The overall level of ability to wrestle with and coordinate change requires that we not only manage change to overcome that resistance, but we also have to manage complexity. Complexity has a substantial impact on change. And as we go to slide 10, we can talk about and identify some of the classic sorts of impacts of complexity on change, especially within the IT environment. Complexity makes many things difficult for lots of reasons, whether it be that business risk associated with process improvement because of the number of cultures or the number of processes or the conflicting business goals. Every addition of complexity makes change more difficult and more effort to sell the concepts to the audience because there are so many different paths. If you think about change and the paths that you have to communicate or navigate in terms of change, if you draw it up sort of as a communication model, there are more paths than there ever have before. Therefore, every additional layer of complexity will continue to add more effort to making this change happen. More effort, more risk, more potential conflicts between different improvement programs, different silos within the organization. And then obviously, for those organizations that are doing this for mandate purposes or that they've been told that they have